Good afternoon, students. Congratulations on making it all the way to week 12 of this class. We're in the last week of the class. So this week, you're going to take your final exam. And today I'm going to go over punctuation. I'm going to go over all of the different punctuation symbols that you need to learn in order to write a well-punctuated paper. So without further ado, I will now start to share my screen. Chapter 13, Punctuation Marks. The comma is a punctuation mark that indicates a pause in a sentence or a separation of things in a list. Commas can be used in a variety of ways: introduction word, lists, coordinating adjectives, conjunctions in compound sentences, interrupting words, dates, addresses, greetings, and letters. Commas after an introductory word or phrase. You may notice a comma that appears near the beginning of a sentence, usually after a word or phrase. The comma lets the reader know where the introductory word or phrase ends and the main sentence begins. So in this sentence, without spoiling the surprise, is an introductory phrase. We need to tell her to save the date is the main sentence. Notice how they are separated by a comma. Comma in a list of items. When you want to list several nouns in a sentence, you separate each word with a comma. This allows the reader to pause after each item and identify which words are included in the grouping. When you list items in a sentence, put a comma after each noun, then add the word before the last item. However, you do not need to include a comma before the last item. We'll need to get flour, tomatoes, and cheese at the store. The pizza will be topped with olives, peppers, and pineapple chunks. So here you have a list of items, and you have to put commas after each of the nouns except for the last one. Commas and coordinating adjectives. You can use commas. You can use commas to list adjectives as well as nouns. A string of adjectives that describe a noun are called coordinative adjectives. These adjectives come before the noun they modify and are separated by commas. One important thing to note, however, is that unlike listing nouns, the word "and" does not always need to be before the last adjective. It was a bright, windy, clear day. Our kite flowed red, yellow, and blue in the morning sunlight. Commas before conjunctions in compound sentences. Commas are sometimes used to separate two independent clauses. The commas come after the first independent clause, followed by a conjunction, such as for and but. He missed class today, comma, and he thinks you will be out tomorrow too. He says his fever is gone, comma, but he is still very tired. Commas before and after interrupting words. In a sentence, you might interrupt your train of thought with a word or phrase called interrupting words. Interrupting words come at the beginning or middle of a sentence. When the interrupting words appear at the beginning of a sentence, a comma appears after the word or phrase. If you can believe it, comma, people once thought the sun and planets orbited around Earth. Luckily, some people questioned that theory. When interrupting words come in the middle of a sentence, they are separated from the rest of the sentence by commas. You can determine where the commas should go by looking for the part of the sentence that is not essential to make sense. An Italian astronomer, comma, Galileo, comma, proved that the Earth orbited the sun. We have known, comma, for hundreds of years now, comma, that the Earth and other planets exist in a solar system. Commas in dates, addresses, greetings, and letters. You will also use commas when you write the date in cover letters and emails. Commas are used when you write the date, when you include an address, and when you greet someone. If you are writing out the full date, add a comma after the day and before the year. You do not need to add a comma when you write the month and day, or when you write the month and year. If you need to continue the sentence after you add a date, add a comma after the date. This letter is postmarked May 4th, 2001. Her birthday is May 5th, no comma. He visited the country in July, no comma, 2009. I registered for the conference on March 7th, 2010, so we should get our tickets soon. You will also use commas when you include addresses and locations. When you include an address in a sentence, be sure to place a comma after the street and the city. Do not place a comma before the state and the zip code. Like a date, if you need to continue the sentence after adding the address, simply add a comma after the address. We moved to 4542 Box Cutter Lane, Hope, Missouri 70832. After moving to Boston, Massachusetts, Eric used public transportation to get to work. Greetings are always separated by a comma. When you write a email or letter, you add a comma after a greeting word or the person's name. You also need to include a comma after a word or phrase you put before your signature. Hello, I would like more information about your job posting. Thank you, comma. So hello, comma, thank you, comma, Anita, their name. And then dear, to whom it may concern, comma, sincerely, comma. Key takeaways. Punctuation marks provide visual cues to readers to tell them how to read a sentence. Punctuation marks convey meaning. Commas indicate a pause on a list in a sentence. A comma should be used after an introductory word to separate this word from the main sentence. A comma comes after each noun in the sentence. The word "and" is added before the last noun. A comma comes after every coordinating adjective except for the last adjective. Commas can be used to separate two independent clauses in compound sentences as long as the conjunction follows the comma. Commas are used to separate interrupting words from the rest of the sentence. When you write the date, you add a comma between the day and the year. You also add a comma after the year if the sentence continues after the date. When they are used in a sentence, addresses have commas after the street address and the city. If a sentence continues after the address, a comma comes after the zip code. When you write a letter, you use commas in your greeting and in your closing at the end of the letter. Semicolon. The semicolon indicates a break in the flow of a sentence but functions differently than a period or a comma. When you encounter a semicolon, this represents a good place to pause or take a breath. Use a semicolon to combine two closely related independent clauses. Correct. Be sure to wear clean, well-pressed clothes to the interview. Semicolon. Appearances are important. In this case, writing the independent clause as two sentences separated by a period is correct. However, using a semicolon to combine clauses can make your writing more interesting by creating a variety of sentence lengths and structures while preserving the flow of ideas. Semicolon to join items in a list. You can also use a semicolon to join items in a list when the items in the list already require commas. Semicolons help the reader distinguish between items in a list. The color combinations we can choose from are black, comma, white, comma, and gray. Semicolon. Green, comma, brown, comma, and black, semicolon, and red, green, and brown. the color combinations we can pick. So by using semicolons in this sentence, the readers can easily distinguish between the three sets of colors. Key takeaways. Use a semicolon to join two independent clauses. Use a semicolon to separate items in a sentence when those items already require a comma. The colon. The colon is another punctuation mark used to indicate a full stop. Use a colon to introduce lists, quotes, examples, and explanations. You can also use a comma after the greeting in business letters and memos. Colons to introduce a list. Use a colon to introduce a list of items. Introduce the list with an independent clause. This team will tour 3 states, colon, New York, comma, Pennsylvania, comma, and Maryland. I have to take 4 classes this semester, colon, composition, comma, statistics, comma, ethics, and Italian. You can use a comma to introduce a quote. Mark Twain said it best, colon, when in doubt, tell the truth. If a quote is longer than 40 words, skip a line after the colon and indent the left margin of the quote 5 spaces. This is known as a block quotation. Because quotations longer than 40 words use indentation to indicate a quote, quotation marks are not necessary. My father always loved Mark Twain words, colon. There are basically 2 types of people. People who accomplish things, comma, and people who claim to have accomplished things. The first group is less crowded. Colon to introduce examples or explanations. Use a colon to introduce an example or to further explain an idea presented in the first part of the sentence. The first part of the sentence must always be an independent clause. That is, it must stand alone as a complete thought with a subject and a verb. Do not use a colon after phrases like such as or for example. Our company offers many publishing services, colon, writing, comma, editing, comma, and reviewing. Key takeaways. Use a colon to introduce a list, quote, or example. Use a colon after a greeting in business letters and memos. Quotation marks set off a group of words from the rest of the text. Use quotation marks to indicate direct quotation of another person's words or to indicate a title. Quotation marks always appear in pairs. A direct quotation is an exact account of what someone said or wrote. To include a direct quotation in your writing, enclose the words in quotation marks. An indirect quotation is a restatement of what someone said or quote. An indirect quotation does not use the person's exact words. You do not need to use quotation marks for indirect quotations. Carly said, comma, quotation mark, I'm not ever going back there again, quotation mark. Indirect quotation. Carly said that she would never go back there, no quotation marks. Punctuating direct quotations. Quotation marks show the readers another person's exact words. Often you will want to identify who is speaking. You can do this at the beginning, middle, or end of the quote. Notice the use of commas and capitalized words. Madison said, so here you have the identifier of the person at the beginning of the sentence. So here you have Madison said, comma, quotation mark. Let's stop at the farmer's market to buy some fresh vegetables for dinner. Now you have the Madison said in the beginning of this, in the middle of the sentence, quotation mark. Let's stop at the farmer's market, comma, quotation mark. Madison said, comma, quotation mark, to buy some fresh vegetables for dinner, period, quotation mark. And now you have the Madison said at the end of the sentence, quotation mark. Let's stop at the farmer's market to buy some fresh vegetables for dinner, quotation mark. Madison said. Always capitalize the first letter of a quote, even if it is not at the beginning of the sentence. When using identifying words in the middle of the sentence, the beginning of the second part of the quote does not need to be capitalized. Use commas between identifying words and quotes. Quotation marks must be placed after commas and periods. Place quotation marks after question marks and exclamation points if the question or exclamation is part of the quoted text. Question is part of quoted text. The new employee asked, quotation mark, "When is lunch?" Question mark, quotation mark. Question is not part of a quoted text. Did you ever hear her say you were question mark? The next Picasso, quotation mark, question mark. Exclamation is part of a quoted text. My supervisor beamed, comma, quotation mark. Thanks for all your hard work, exclamation, quotation mark. Exclamation is not part of a quoted text. He said, I, exclamation mark, single-handedly saved the company thousands of dollars, quotation mark, exclamation point. Use single quotations to show a question. Use single quotations to show a quotation within a quotation. Teresa said, I wanted to take my dog to the festival, comma, but the man at the gate said, single quotation, no dogs allowed, end quotation mark. When you say single quotation, I can't help it, single quotation, what exactly does it mean? Question mark, double quotation, quotation mark. The instructions say, comma, single quotation, tighten the screws one at a time, end quotation. Use quotation marks around titles of short works of writing, such as essays, songs, poems, short stories, and chapters in a book. Usually titles of longer works, such as books, magazines, albums, newspapers, and novels, are underlined. But these days, they're not underlined, they're italicized. So Annabelle Lee, so that's a name of a poem, so it's between quotation marks, is one of my favorite romantic poems. The New York Times has been in publication since 1851. Use quotation marks to enclose direct quotes and titles of short works. Use single quotation marks to enclose a quote within a quote. Do not use quotation marks for indirect quotations. Apostrophe. An apostrophe is a punctuation mark that is used with a noun to show possession or to indicate where a letter has been left out to form a contraction. An apostrophe in the letters S indicate who or what owns something. To show possession with a singular noun, add apostrophe S. Jen's dance routine mesmerized everyone in the room. The dog's leash is hanging on the hook beside the door. Jen's sister is also coming to the party. Notice that singular nouns end in S. Still take the apostrophe S ending to show possession. To show possession with a plural noun that ends in S, just add an apostrophe. If the plural noun does not end in an S, add an apostrophe S. Add an apostrophe S. A plural noun that ends in S, the drummers apostrophe sticks all. The drummers apostrophe sticks all moved in the same rhythm like a machine. Plural noun that does not end in an S. The people's votes clearly show that no one supported the management decision. Contraction. A contraction is a word that is formed by combining two words. In a contraction, an apostrophe shows where one or more letters have been left out. Contractions are commonly used in informal writing, but not in formal writing. I do not like ice cream. I don't like ice cream. We will see you later. We'll see you later. So are not, cannot, does not, do not, is not, he will, I will, she will, they will, you will, it is, it has, she is, she has, there is, there has, who is, who has. And so all of the contractions for these words aren't, can't, doesn't, don't, isn't, he'll, I'll, she'll, they'll, you'll, it's, let's, she's, theirs, whose. And so contractions are used when you are informally speaking and in casual conversation. But when you write your academic papers, you need to write out your contractions. So when you write your academic research papers, don't use contractions. So instead of saying, I don't have a response, you would say, I do not have a response. Key takeaways. Use apostrophes to show possession. Add apostrophe s to singular nouns and plural nouns that do not end in s. Add apostrophe to plural nouns that end in s. Use apostrophes in contractions to show where a letter or letters have been left out. A punctuation mark, or apostrophe, a punctuation mark that is used with a noun to show possession or to indicate where a letter has been left out to form a contraction. Contraction, a word that is formed by combining two words. In a contraction, an apostrophe shows where one or more letters have been left out. Parentheses. Parentheses are punctuation marks that are always used in pairs and contain material that is secondary to the meaning of a sentence. Parentheses must never contain the subject or verb of a sentence. A sentence should make sense if you delete any text within parentheses and the parentheses. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes has to be the worst movie I have seen. Parentheses, so far. Your spinach and garlic salad is one of the most delicious, parentheses, and nutritious foods I have ever tasted. Parentheses enclose information that is secondary to the meaning of a sentence. In other words, the words in the parentheses are not necessary to the sentence. Parentheses are always used in pairs. A dash. A dash is a punctuation mark used to set off information in a sentence. For emphasis, you can enclose text within two dashes or just use one dash. To create a dash on a keyboard, type two hyphens together. Do not put a space between dashes and text. Arrive to the interview early, dash, 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 but not too early. Any of the suits, dash, 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 except for the purple one, dash, 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 should be fine to wear. So we use dashes for emphasis. Dashes indicate a pause in a text, and dashes set off information in a sentence to show emphasis. And last but not least, hyphen. A hyphen looks similar to a dash, but it's shorter and used in different ways. Use a hyphen to combine words that work together to form a single description. The 55-year-old athlete was just as qualified for the marathon as his younger opponents. My doctor recommended against taking the medication since it can be habit-forming. My study group focused on preparing for the mid-year review. Hyphens, when a word breaks at the end of a line. Use a hyphen to divide a word across two lines of text. You may notice that most word processing programs will do this for you. If you have to manually insert a hyphen, place the hyphen between two syllables. If you are unsure where to place a hyphen, consult a dictionary. My supervisor was concerned that the team meeting, meet hyphen ing would conflict with the client meeting. Hyphens join words that work as one adjective. Hyphen break words across two lines of text. And that's it for punctuation. If you can follow those punctuation rules, then you've got your punctuation covered. And you don't have to worry about punctuation when you write your essay. Notice that you can also use Grammarly and ChatGPT to help you correct your punctuation. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me at any time, And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to the Professor H Writing channel. And that's the end of this essay. That's the end of this video, and this is the last lecture you get to have to hear from me of week 12, and I congratulate you on finishing the entire 12-week class of English 101.